In the spring when you're growing radishes or lettuces and stuff, and arugula, like arugula that you grow in your garden tastes so much different than the stuff that you buy in the clamshell in the grocery store, which is still fine, but it's a different experience. I'm Sara Gasbarra, and I'm a culinary garden designer in Nashville, Tennessee. My love of gardening came from being in the vegetable garden with my father. And when I was growing up, we always had a vegetable garden. We would cook dinner, and then after dinner, we would just spend time outside. And it was always picking something or watering the garden. It wasn't on an irrigation system back then. Because I had this little skill set of cooking and gardening, I was always cooking for my friends in college. I always seemed to find an apartment or a landlord who would let me have the backyard. So I always, on the side, had a little garden. I would walk from the train to where Northwestern's campus is downtown, and it's along Michigan Avenue, right in the Gold Coast. And I would see these landscape crews, and they were outside all day, and I would walk past them all the time, and I'm like, I want to do that. I want to be outside. I started volunteering for a farmer's market in Chicago, eventually became the project manager of that, but it was right around the time that Instagram came out. Very attracted to Instagram immediately because it was so visual, and so I think it was the art side of me as well. I was always taking photos of everything we were growing in this garden, and we were growing unusual stuff because I was always so curious about growing sort of the weird and rare stuff. And this market is where all the chefs and restaurants shop, and so I started following chefs on Instagram. They followed me back. They saw what I was posting. I had restaurants reaching out, asking me if I could set up a garden, and that's how the business was born. So I would set up culinary gardens on site at restaurants. So in the city of Chicago, you don't have a lot of ground space. Most of them were on rooftops, sometimes raw rooftops. We would climb a ladder up to the space, and so I would sit down with the chef in the very beginning, talk through what they wanted to grow, determine how big the garden is. Most of these projects were pretty small and very specialized. So we were growing culinary herbs, edible flowers, garnishes. I'm really into eggplant right now. All those strange eggplants on my rooftop I think are super fun. Anything unusual. I'm so outside the box when it comes to my own garden. I can always go to the farmer's market and buy all the amazing stuff, normal, regular tomatoes that are still delicious. When planting my own garden, I love to grow the things that you just don't find. As far as sourcing plants, there are certain things I start myself. So if there's anything that's really unusual varieties of tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, I'll do that in very small quantities inside my house, which seems crazy, but I've got a system. In Chicago and here in Nashville, I work with some fantastic and amazing nurseries that sort of operate as farms. So they're nurseries, but they're farms in the sense that they do all their own propagation. They are growing everything from seed, and so they're not bringing in plants. And I like that because there's better variety than versus going to a nursery that's buying and bringing everything in. And so between these this little selection of nurseries here, they've got an amazing selection of stuff. My original plan was just to continue what I was doing, continuing to work within restaurants and within hotels. But then when the pandemic happened, I lost temporarily all of my work. And so I didn't really work for a year, but then it opened the door for another opportunity, which was everyone was at home and everyone was looking for things to do outside with their family, with their children, with their kids. And so that's when this opportunity to work within residential and private gardens kind of came about. We are in the garden of one of my clients, and we have 9 beds here. When planning this garden out, I always like to put the herb beds towards the front of the garden because typically those are the ones that you would access the most. They're closest to the house, and then some of the larger vegetation would go towards the back. In this bed, I have basil, some chard, lavender, a few little carrots tucked in over there, and then in this bed, we have lavender, oregano, chives, green fennel, and rosemary. So I always incorporate flowers into each of the beds. Sometimes it's for pollinators, other times it's just to add a pop of color, just because I don't want it to just be blocks of green. So in this case, I've put in some flowers here just to kind of add some color to the beds and make them kind of come alive. So originally when we were planning this garden, this bed was supposed to be for fruit. And then we realized when you stand in the front of the greenhouse and look straight through, you can see it. So we decided to make it a pollinator bed. We wanted there to be this kind of wall of color. I always, if there's space, love to incorporate a pollinator bed. If you don't have the space, you can certainly add these flowers, sort of integrate them into other beds. But it's really important to have pollinator-friendly flowers in your garden to bring in bees, to bring in wasps even, to help pollinate those crops that really need it, like squash, tomatoes, eggplant, cucumbers. It's extremely helpful. What I love about this space is obviously it's a vegetable garden, but we've created also a living area and an entertaining area. So we've got big plans for this greenhouse that don't involve actually growing anything. And it'll be an area, especially in cooler months, where they can spend time in the garden, hang out inside the greenhouse, have this kind of cozy, warm and fun environment when it's cooler outside. I think there's a plan for a fire pit. And so again, the importance of creating a space where you grow and you work, but you also get to hang out and entertain, to me makes a garden exciting. I love to build a garden that you can coexist in with the vegetation. There's a place for you to sit, there's a place for you to entertain, there's a place for you to eat if you want to eat in the garden. To me, that's really important. And it doesn't have to be a big garden. I mean, I have a small garden on my rooftop, and there's a place to sit, there's a place to entertain, there's a place to cook. And so the garden is an extension of your home, it's an extension of your kitchen, it's an extension of your living room. And so if I have people over to my house, or my clients have people over to their homes, I always encourage them to utilize the garden space as a place to start or end your evening, or just to hang out. So this space serves as a garden, obviously an edible garden, a culinary garden. It's a place where I entertain, and it's also a place where I cook. I have a grill. Sometimes I like to invite friends here, and maybe we craft some cocktails or make some drinks, and I let them walk around the space and kind of clip herbs and aromatics as they see fit, whatever they want to pair with the drinks. I started my business in Chicago, and I often was working with people who just had a balcony space. And they came to me and they were like, I don't think I can do a garden just because I don't have enough space. And you can. Maybe you grow one tomato, and maybe it's a tomato that yields a lot, like a cherry tomato. Maybe you focus on herbs and aromatics and flowers. But just because you don't have a large backyard certainly doesn't mean that you can't have a successful, beautiful garden that produces for you. If you're planning something, even if it's a small space, set aside a corner of it and put 2 simple chairs. One Adirondack chair. They could be folding chairs, and a little table. It doesn't have to be fancy, little cafe chairs. So that when you're done, you can just sit and enjoy it, and sit and look around. Because even in the morning, the garden in the morning is so different from the garden in the evening. The sounds, the visuals, what's going on, the insects, all of those things, it's very different. And so I like people to slow down and really enjoy the space in that way. Something I say to everyone is, don't be afraid to fail. I fail every year. Something goes wrong. You can't control everything. You can't control the weather, you can't control insects as much as you try. Everyone fails. It's a learning process. I'm still learning, even in year 12. But other than that, I would say it doesn't matter what size, space you have. If you've got a small balcony or you have a huge backyard, you can still have a garden. If you like this video, subscribe to Handmade for more just like this.